So you're interested in playing a half-orc, or perhaps you're just interested in knowing more about them. Either way, I can be of service. Now, for gameplay, what if I told you that half-orcs can be some of the most strong melee combatants? Right away we'll get started with the abilities that half-orcs get, which I assure you are nothing to trifle with. Let's begin with the most infamous ability that half-orcs get, and that is Relentless Endurance. This ability, which resets upon every long rest, makes sure that when hit to 0 HP, the half-orc can survive the hit. Now, this means any hit.
That which lives before me is soon to be a dead half-breed ground to nothing. Don't worry, worm. I am well known for my mercy. You'll die as quickly as the rest of your pathetic friends. What? There's no way. You should be paced on the ground.
The weight of the world itself could fall upon a half-orc, and the world might just think it's on the shoulders of a giant. This ability makes you heavily effective against enemy mages, as you can go ahead and charge an enemy mage and engage in a deadly duel with him, where he's going to be in quite the pickle. Because you see, most spells are single instance spells. You cast your spell, it hits the enemy, they get dealt a certain amount of damage. That's it, your turn's ended. Because of this, being a half-orc, you'll be able to at least survive one extra turn when dueling this mage, which is plenty of time to deal a huge amount of damage. Now, it is worth noting that there are two types of spells that might cause a bit of trouble for you. First, there are extremely high-level spells, such as Power Word Kill, which would kill anyone instantly under a certain amount of HP. So while that's an issue for you, there is also the issue of spells that deal damage for more than one turn, or that hit you multiple times in a single turn. Now, thankfully, spells like Scorching Ray that enemy spellcasters might use against you have disadvantage against you if you're too close to the enemy. Now, what does Relentless Endurance sort of suggest you lean into class-wise? Well, you see, it actually doesn't. Relentless Endurance itself just extends your life by one extra turn, as long as you're not hit again. So, being at 1 HP, you are basically the equivalent, despite any of your resistances, despite any of your abilities, to any class in your situation. A Barbarian at 1 HP and a Wizard at 1 HP are practically the same thing. So no matter what, Relentless Endurance absolutely benefits you no matter which choice you make class-wise. Now let's move on to the second most useful ability that half-orcs get, and that is Savage Attacks. When you roll a critical hit against an enemy while you're using a melee weapon, you can go ahead and add the weapon die of your weapon to the critical damage. Now as this functions is basically this. Let's say I go ahead and roll a nat 20 with my Great Axe. Normally, I would have a 1d20 plus my ability modifiers and damage and such added on top of an additional 1d20. Now, how Savage Attacks functions is not only do I get that second 1d20, but I get an additional third 1d20 on top of that. Now, it is worth noting that if I am wielding a greatsword, which will give me a 2d6, while for critting, I will gain another 2d6 on top of my base damage. With Savage Attacks, I will only get a 1d6, which brings to the question of what, if you are a half-orc, should you use? Because you see, a 2d6 gives you better average damage compared to a 1d12. My recommendation is that you primarily stick with what you want to wield, as after all, the damage is really not even that much of a factor. Now, if you want a sort of more objective opinion, then I would recommend, as long as you are not playing a barbarian, then you should go ahead and use a greatsword. The reasoning, you see, is because barbarians have something very similar to Savage Attacks. Now, your question might be, alright, what exactly should I use with a half-orc if I really want to take advantage of Savage Attacks? Well, in that case, my suggestion would be to do something very simple. do your best to always gain advantage. Having advantage doubles the chances of you having a crit, and so lets you use savage attacks more often. After all, there is no limit to how many times savage attacks can trigger. All we have to do is keep getting lucky. Now, you may ask, what exactly should I go class-wise that'll fit with savage attacks? Well, there's 3 in particular that I recommend. First, I would recommend playing a champion fighter. Champion fighters have their critical chance range changed from only landing a 20 to also landing a 19. This doubles your chance to crit, which, if you do this as well as try and maximize the chances of gaining advantage, you'll have an overwhelmingly large amount of chance to crit as opposed to an average Joe. My second recommendation will be playing a barbarian. Not only do you have, for example, if you're wielding a great axe, have extra 1d12s to enjoy in the future, but with reckless attack, which you gain at level 2, you can maximize the chances of you having a crit by always having advantage at the cost of having advantage on attacks against you. Now, for my third recommendation, I would suggest playing an assassin rogue. Now you might ask, a rogue? Why would I want to play a skinny, flimsy, frail rogue as opposed to these sort of huge, terrifying barbarians and fighters? Well, you see, if you play an assassin rogue, then you can absolutely maximize the usage of savage attacks, because if you go before an enemy on the very first turn of the turn order, once a fight begins, your hits will be crits, and so the moment a fight begins is the moment it very well may end. Now, for some of their minor abilities. First, they have Dark Vision, which I assure you is nothing to scoff about. Dark Vision is a very useful ability that while many races do indeed have, those that lack it are extremely hurt by that loss. Being able to see in the dark up to 12 meters, they can make sure that they can be proper mid to close range combatants. For their last minor ability, they have Menacing, which gives them proficiency in the intimidation skill, which sort of leads us to the background of half-orcs as a race. If you play a half-orc, you should know the residents of Faerun, and especially Baldur's Gate, won't exactly look upon you in the most fond manner. While it will be of no means as large as the prejudice of the citizens of Faerun will levy against, say, tieflings or drow, half-orcs will be especially looked down upon by the residents of small villages that have been assaulted by bands of orcs in the past. This is the case, as while it is possible that a half-orc can be the result of simply a love affair, there is also the particularly prevalent result of their birth happening after an orc raid. Each half-orc finds a way to gain acceptance from those who hate or fear his orc cousins. Some are reserved, try not to draw attention to themselves. Others demonstrate their piety and good-heartedness as publicly as they can. Others simply try to be so tough that no one wants to mess with them. Now, what half-orc will you be? That's a question you'll have to decide yourself. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you want to support me in the spare time I put into this little hobby of mine, you can do so by liking this video if you want more like it. And subscribing always doesn't hurt. I hope you all have a nice day.